So the number of experienced agents that we hired from 2022 to 2023 increased by about 180%. So that's how we got to that more balance. But the increase in those experienced agent hires really had an exponential impact of the company dollar that was generated.
Hey, it's a great day to recruit. And thanks for joining us for this episode of the Recruiting Insight Podcast. Our theme this season is How'd You Do That? And we're talking to leaders who have developed and executed a compelling recruiting strategy that really worked. Now, this week we're going to be connecting with Anthony Jackson. Anthony is the Vice President of Finance and Operations for Lyon Real Estate, one of the most prominent real estate companies in Central California. Now, almost 18 months ago, the Lyon executive team and managers set out to increase the percentage of experienced agents that they were bringing into the company. Now, they've had great success. They've increased that number by 180% in 2023. Anthony's going to walk us through this transition from both a financial and operations perspective. I think you'll learn a lot from Lyon's journey, and you'll capture some great takeaways that you can start using right away. So let's get started. Well, hey, Anthony, thanks so much for joining us today. Super excited about having you on the podcast. And I think our listeners are really going to enjoy this because it's going to be a little more metric driven and, than we would with our normal guests. And not that we don't enjoy those free form sort of discussions, but your background as a finance and operations manager really approaches recruiting from a pretty unique perspective. And so I think we're going to learn a lot today from that. But as we get started, can you tell us a little about your background and how you got into real estate?
Yeah, so thanks for having me, Ben. So at Lyon Real Estate now, and we primarily serve the greater Sacramento area, which is also where I was born and raised. Went to Fresno State where I got my business degree with an option in accounting. So you kind of alluded to that metric and operational background. And then while I was in my final year at Fresno State, I began working part-time for a company called Guarantee Real Estate. Although I always tell people my first job in real estate was really as a kid being given side jobs by my aunt, who's been a realtor for almost 30 years, coming up here in a couple of years.
Okay. Well, yeah, that formative sort of years. So what type of, was your aunt having you do spreadsheets and all that as well? Or
Not so much spreadsheets, it was kind of summer jobs of folding marketing materials. I think we have Memorial Day coming up here in the next couple of days, and she'd have little flags, American flags, with her business cards hole punched on either side, slid onto the flag part or the stick part of the flag, and she'd have me stick those in her neighbors' yards and installing signs, open house signs, all of that good stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, you're cutting your teeth with the real deal there, having to do that kind of work. So, we also had a background with home services a little bit. Can you tell us a little about that and some of the mentors that you had along the way that really affected not just your aunt but others that you've worked with?
Yeah, so you kind of alluded to some mentors, and I have a lot of great mentors, and talking about each one of them could be a session all in its own. So, I'll try and be a little quick. So, shortly started after working for Guarantee, they were acquired by Home Services America. So that's how that kind of came in a fold. And that kind of opened up an opportunity for me when I was hired on at Guarantee as an accountant and then later promoted to a senior accountant. So thinking back, at that time, early in my career, I was highly impressionable and very fortunate to have several great leaders that I was around and able to interact with. And some of those included Scott Leonard, Joan Eaton, Paul Gibson, as well as Laura Everson, who was the CFO at Guarantee. And she was kind of my first real boss, and I count Laura as one of my early mentors. And, something she always taught me was, we're all going to make mistakes, right? Never be upset about a mistake, but always make a change that would prevent that mistake from occurring again, right?
Yeah,
So that was an important component. And then, shortly after that, Scott, Joan, and Paul had retired, and then Andy Nazaroff, who, Ben, you've worked with in the past,
yes,
became the president and CEO at Guarantee. And, an opportunity came up for me to be in an elevated role with the company as its VP of Finance. And, Andy offered me that opportunity, and it certainly changed the trajectory of my career, which I'm thankful for. But, I think thinking back, the other part that Andy taught me and mentored me through was, how to build a mindset that is needed to be resilient and to where you're self-improving, especially in our business, right? Which is important.
Yeah, so we've and I think some of that background. We've worked with a lot of home services companies, and they tend to be very metric driven. They're very financially focused. So from that perspective, how would you say your recruiting affects is connected to the financial health of a company, and how that has that connection been experienced in your situations?
Yeah, so now you're having me put on my kind of bean counter hat on right now, right? And recruiting, it's really integral to all of the above. And that was something that being at Guarantee, it kind of opened up an opportunity within home services where I was working on projects and things like that across the organization. And it, kind of ultimately led me down to relocating out to Dallas to work for the Ebby Halliday companies and an iconic brand, an iconic company right within the industry, and loved my time there, loved working with the people there. And it was there, especially under the leadership of Chris Kelly, who was their then president and CEO, where he really imparted me the wisdom of focus and knowing what to focus on. And kind of in that those learnings is what is the tie of recruiting to the P&L and how does that impact it? And so it's integral because even for those of us that have core services that may constitute a substantial slice of our business, the recruiting and retention component is key, right? The brokerage and ultimately our agents is the engine that drives everything. But you also brought up something else, Ben, where you look at it from the P&L perspective. I would note that there's ways to go about recruiting and getting people to come over, but it also has to be done in a sustainable manner, in a situation that's win-win for both the agent and the broker, right? We don't want to have these lopsided deals or arrangements just to get someone in the door as a recruit at our brokerage.
Yeah, and it can be something that can you recruit the wrong people. You can be in a situation where you're going the wrong way and creating problems. But it sounds like if you had to rank, across all kind of the financial levers that a typical COO type of has, with the controlling expenses, the core services, ancillary services, those kind of things. So would you rank it right at the top, or how would you rank that compared to the other issues?
Yeah, I think, Ben, right, like I said, it's kind of integral to the way we operate our businesses, and it's at the top. If it's not at the top, it's near the top, right? And but all of those things that you kind of describe as being levers within a P&L or the financials of the company, they're all kind of interrelated, right? You could have you could give away the best splits and with no fees and everything and recruit everyone in, but that impacts your P&L, right? And that's when I kind of refer back to that win-win situation of having an equitable balance of what those arrangements are is important. I think the other thing when I think of recruiting, right, is making sure that we're not just recruiting for recruiting's sake and to have the most bodies. That we are truly trying to make it a win-win situation for that agent and for us as the broker. I had lunch yesterday with one of our managers, Bill Evans, who is the branch manager of our Auburn office. And, this, Ben, in our weekly tag groups, he talks about going after his closed detail report. And what he does with that is he engages with each of his agents on each of their closed transactions to get feedback about the agent on the other side. And by doing that, he's able to make sure that whoever he's going to incorporate into his recruiting process is ultimately going to be a good fit for the office and not jeopardize the culture or the integrity of his office. So you could recruit in a productive agent that closes a lot of business, but if that upsets the apple cart, well, now you're going backwards on recruiting and retention, right? And so all of those things, all of those different levers play a part in ultimately trying to accomplish what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, yeah. So I remembered a quote from the movie Miracle, where the 1980s, hockey team, won the gold medal, and the coach who was always, the legs feed the wolf, and I think in many cases your recruiting feeds the wolf in this whole equation. Not that there isn't other things that are important, but it's a structural core piece in order that does just seem to fill the rest of the process out and cause things to work. So
Yeah,
let's
it's definitely the engine, right?
okay.
The engine.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to describe it. Without it, we're really in trouble. So let's drill down a little bit more specifically to what's been happening in your organization in the last couple years. So we started working a little more closely together. Well, we've been working together with Lyon, your company, for probably 10 years with our third pull product and some other things. But we started to focus more on experienced agents. I think it was about mid 2022, and you were starting to I think been in the role for a little bit at that time, and started to say, hey, it looks like we probably need to focus some more effort on experienced agents and experienced agent recruiting. I think previously you had been recruiting 26% of your total recruits were experienced agents. You since went up to 44%, so almost doubled that. So let's talk about that journey a little bit. How'd that happen, and how'd you increase your focus on experienced agent recruiting?
Yeah, I think, Ben, you and I had a conversation. I think it was at a leading RE conference,
Yeah.
and which is typically in February or March of every year. And we had an initial conversation, but I don't think we picked that ball back up until later that fall of that year, to where we
Right.
really started having some deep conversations around this. And kind of the, like you referred to, 26 or 25, 24% of our overall hires were experienced agents, and the rest newbies, right? New agents, new licensees. And so after looking at that ratio of experienced hires compared to new agents, we knew we wanted to make a shift in an effort to be more balanced, right? And that balance can helps in a variety of ways operationally, right? A manager is able to see the fruits of their labor more soon, because those experienced agents are getting more closings quicker, right? A new agent, it's a longer path. You have to build into it, and they take a lot more energy. And so we want to be more balanced in that way. So there's certainly benefits to being more balanced when it comes to experienced agent recruiting as well as new agent recruiting. But I would say the biggest driving force was simply us reacting to what we were seeing in the market. You
Okay.
know, if we look at the end of 2022 and going into 2023, right? Everyone that's listening to this podcast saw a drop in closed transactions.
Right.
And those that goes down to the agent seeing a decrease in closed transactions and their livelihoods. And so, it was a reaction to what we were seeing in the market, a market that had slowed, and where agents were in need of more support, better support. And we thought, hey, our Lyon value proposition, especially including the accessible leadership of our very experienced and talented branch managers, that would be something that would appeal to an agent over at XYZ company, right? That, maybe didn't have that support, that infrastructure, that live and in-person training, a branch manager that they actually had a relationship with and knew and could pick up the phone and call them. So that was kind of the impetus for that shift in that mindset around trying to be more balanced with our recruiting.
Yeah, and I think another aspect to that is during any sort of constricted market, there tends to be a little more move with consumers, right, towards experienced agents. It's not an order taking environment anymore. It's where, hey, I've got to actually do this work and be a good agent, do prospecting, all that kind of stuff. So some of that, obviously new agents can learn that, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. But certainly experienced agents who have been maybe through some difficulties before would have more capacity in those areas. I think some of that would be as well.
Yeah. Well, and that was conversations our leadership team had, in our manager meetings of what they were seeing happen in the marketplace, and with deal doctoring with other agents at XYZ company on the other side of the transaction. how there was that feeling of we need to help, we need to help level up what the level of professionalism looks like within our industry. So
Yeah. So you have this objective. Hey, I want to bring on more experienced agents. We have this great value proposition. We can attract people in a very effective way. So what were some of the tactics and strategies that you employed in that process?
yeah, so there were a few things that we did, but I would say that the primary component, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit ago with some conversations you and I had in mid to late 2022, was, we really just made the biggest thing was that we made the investment in each of our managers to go through individual one-on-one co-recruit coaching, right? So each manager completed the 12 sessions of co-recruit coaching, and we kind of staggered it, right? We did this. We didn't put them all in at once. We kind of staggered it over a period of 9 months, roughly 9 months or so, I'd say. And then from there, we went into weekly talent attraction group sessions as a group together. So that was, I would say, the biggest thing that we did that really kind of shifted the tides in transitioning to having a more balanced approach when it came to agent recruiting.
So we'll get into some numbers in a minute because I want to talk about the results of how that worked out. But as you implement this type of plan, right? So this is it's kind of like sometimes anytime you introduce something new to an organization, it's almost like a virus, right? So sometimes the organization can just go kill it. So that didn't happen at Lyon. You were able to implement it, get it established, get the managers buy-in, get the whole organization kind of behind this. How'd you do that?
I think right there's something to say about seeing things through, right? But I think you also have to have the flexibility to make adjustments along the way, to make sure it's working for your team. And so, as with anything, fit is important. So, as we were kind of in those early stages, in concert with your advisement and your collaboration, we did make some adjustments early on in the process to make sure that, because every company is different, every branch manager is different, every office is different, everyone is different, and fit is important. And so, we made some adjustments early on in the process to make sure that the coaching style resonated with each branch manager so that they were actually engaged with the process. Right. And because we didn't want to make this investment, right? It is an investment. We didn't want to make that investment for it to just be a flash in the pan or something that we went through the motions on, but rather we wanted it to be something that we adopted beyond those 12 weeks of coaching, right? Oftentimes you'll go to those one-day seminars and you listen to someone talk and you go, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But then you get back into the whirlwind of it all and it's like, well, that just went out the window, right? And so, we wanted to see it through, but I think where we got the adoption and the engagement with the managers was having the willingness to have the conversations with them about what was working and what was not working, and then being able to make adjustments to that.
So we're going to drill down in a minute on some of the metrics and some of how that execution worked. But from an overall profitability perspective, I mean, this is really where this, you kind of made a lot of the investment in 2022, 2023. You started seeing the execution happen, and so by the end of 2023, how had this affected your profitability and revenue in the company?
Yeah, so you had mentioned previously, we got much more balanced between our new agent hires and our experienced hires. And, part of that, well, large part of it was we increased the number of experienced agents that we hired. So the number of experienced agents that we hired from 2022 to 2023 increased by about 180%. So that's how we got to that more balance. But the increase in those experienced agent hires really had an exponential impact of the company dollar that was generated. So, if we compare the first 12 months of our experienced hires, right? So when they've come on board, what is their first 12 months worth of company dollar? So if we took a look and compared our 2022 hires to our 2023 hires, we saw our company dollar increase by 364%. Okay. Now, I would also note that that increase in company dollar from our 2023 hires will only continue to grow because they're still in their first 12 months within the company. And Ben, as you know, we had a surge of experienced hires that came through our doors at our brokerage in the fourth quarter of 2023. So even if we took it as it stands and those 2023 hires have not completed their first 12 months with the company, even then we've already seen a 364% increase in company dollar generated by our experienced hires.
So it's great to see you put numbers to this, because I think there's an overall feeling, I guess, in the industry at large. Hey, recruiting is the most important thing to really drive profitability, to drive revenue. But I think you can start to see why that is when you start to see, here's some real people that came in, here's the real money that they put, company dollar they put in, and here's the annuity. Here's the just making the forecasting this out a couple of years and seeing how this is going to work. You can see why it's really a pretty important activity, and it's something that really compared to about anything else you can do, it's something you need to focus on for profitability and revenue.
Well, and the hope, right, is well, we're confident in our managers' abilities based off of their experience and their talent to only grow those agents' businesses, right? That's the value that our managers in our company brings to an experienced agent that comes from XYZ into Lyon. Yeah. So that annuity only grows.
Yes. Well, I think for you guys especially, because I spend a lot of time with your managers, and they, they've gotten a lot better at recruiting, but they've always been good at training, mentoring, holding their agents accountable, really troubleshooting, all that stuff that great managers do. They're pretty good at already, and I think it is going to grow. From there. So, well, let's drill down a little bit more on tactics. We kind of went to the end of the process, saw the results there, but part of this is being consistent, kind of week in and week out around a set of activities, tactics that we're going to use on a weekly basis. Can you talk a little about what we employed and how we put that in play?
Yeah. So, so the managers went through their 12 weeks of coaching. Right. And I would say, right, I've already mentioned, we're very fortunate to have a group of branch managers that are very experienced and very talented. However, going through that co-recruit coaching, they were kind of able to refresh and kind of re-energize many of their existing skills, but also found new ones along the way that they were able to kind of develop and adopt and implement into their process. So, they went in, they completed the 12 weeks of training, coaching, and then what we went from there is we went into weekly talent attraction group sessions. So those are kind of accountability group sessions, and so every Monday at 2:30 p.m. everyone kind of joins a Zoom meeting where the prior week's activities are shared with the group. Then they go into 30 minutes of live recruiting where they hit the mute button on their mic, and then they start making calls or sending text messages, and then at the end of that 30 minutes, right, they wrap it up by sharing their successes. So that was the biggest shift, right, was for them to go through the co-recruit coaching, but then follow it up, right, and maintain that consistency of having those weekly sessions as a group together.
Right. So the commitment level that we talk about in coaching for a manager, a full-time manager that has a number of other responsibilities like yours does, the commitment level is 30 minutes a day. We say, hey, if you're willing to spend 30 minutes a day on experienced agent recruiting, then you ought to be able to hire between 6 and 8 experienced agents during the year. And we saw that kind of play out as we've talked. So do you feel like as you worked with the managers that level is reasonable for a manager in this role?
Yeah. Well, we know as everyone listening knows, right, our branch managers, a manager, they get pulled into a ton of different directions. They have their existing agents that they need to meet with, train, assist in deal doctoring, help them with their business plans. They have meetings and events, for the company for their local and state associations and other groups, right? Rotary, Kiwanis, you name it. And the list goes on and on and on of all of their commitments. And so they get pulled in so many different directions, and there's always the whirlwind. However, I'd say, if a manager believes that experienced agent recruiting is vital to the success of their office, as we believe it is, then 30 minutes a day or 2.5 hours a week is reasonable, right? And I think for some of them, it doesn't make sense for them to do it 30 minutes a day, right? For some of them, it makes more sense to dedicate longer segments of time over fewer days, right? Meaning they block out an hour, 2 days a week, and then they wrap up, a 30-minute session. And so that way they're able to get into a rhythm and plan for it when distractions in the whirlwind of the day is minimized. Right. And that's going to be different for different managers due to their, their home lives and when their agents are coming into the office, all of that. Right. And so, I would say more directly to your question, yes, it's reasonable to expect a manager to recruit 30 minutes a day or 2.5 hours a week if they believe that it's vital to the success of their office.
So what and we focused on that, and that's the commitment level that we have. In addition, not in addition, I guess in parallel, we have these tag sessions, these group sessions that are going on that seem to help people, help managers not feel so isolated, or they feel like, hey, I'm doing this on my own. Is anybody else doing this? So you started with one, and then eventually you went to two a week. And can you talk about how those have worked for your managers and what's been the response to them?
Yeah, I think part of it, right, is because there is the whirlwind, and having that dedicated time on your calendar to know this is where I'm going is important, right? And so I think it was probably sometime in the fall of 23, right, Ben? I think we added a second session. So in addition to that Monday session, there's also a Thursday Zoom. And in that Thursday Zoom now, we kind of alternate every other week where one week it'll be kind of a group coaching session, right? To where we're kind of actually revisiting the same topics of co-recruit because, there's nuggets within all of those different sessions that should be revisited often, frequent and often. And so we'll have a coaching session on one Thursday, but then the following Thursday, what we'll do is we'll have maybe a short recruiting discussion topic followed by 30 minutes of live recruiting and wrapped up with everyone sharing their successes. So kind of having that dedicated time as a group, because what we also know is recruiting, it's a combat sport. It's hard. There's a lot of rejection involved, right? And so doing that together as a group, I think has been very beneficial.
Yeah. So one of the big things we teach in coaching, and we believe pretty strongly, are this idea of lead measures, and this all comes from the four disciplines of execution. So the lead measures that we go after are touches, how many touches, outbound touches that we do on a weekly basis, how many conversations, how many of those touches turn into conversations, how many face-to-face appointments do you schedule, recruiting appointments, and then how many database additions are you making. So our metric is we should have 12 touches. That should produce 6 conversations. At least one face-to-face appointment and at least 2 database ads. So over the year 2023, how does your managers do at staying accountable and connected to that metric?
Yeah, so you prepped me ahead of time, so I was able to get exact numbers on this. And right, we also know, Ben, that it's impossible to expect someone to do this for 52 weeks out of 52 weeks of a year, right? Sure. There's vacations, there's sick, there's an off week. Whatever it might be. So we kind of looked at it from the perspective of hoping that they hit these targets for 48 out of the 52 weeks, right? And so those averages for 2023 for our managers came down to 12.8 touches, 6.3 conversations, 1.4 face-to-face appointments scheduled, and then 1.6 database additions each week. So it's crazy how closely aligned it got with, going back again to the beginning of 2022, when you and I had a conversation around co-recruit and kind of what your system and your process was that, all right, now we fast forward, everyone's gone through the co-recruit coaching. everyone is in these talent attraction group sessions, and here are the results of our lead measures for an entire year. So.
Exactly. And so, and all these add up, right? These add up over time. So the metrics from what you gave me before, 6,600 touches, 3,200 conversations, 755 appointments scheduled, and 900 database ads. I mean, this is and you're working inside the Sacramento marketplace. This is I mean, you're touching a lot of people, and you're meeting with a lot of people, and you're connecting with a lot of people through this process.
Well, and right, the managers are, and they're doing the hard work, and this is not easy work, right?
Yes.
I know that, it is not easy work. It's hard work, and they're doing it. And I will also say, we're even seeing it on the new agent side. We have a centralized recruiter that kind of filters through people, and she's even seeing situations where she's engaging with someone, but one of our managers has already gotten to them, right? Because they're at a different company, and our manager is engaged with them, but then they've also kind of came through our company funnel of possible recruits. So, it's a lot of touches, it's a lot of conversations, it's a lot of face-to-face appointments, it's a lot of database additions, and I think we've only started to see the start of the fruits of all of that labor. We've already seen some early success with it, as we talked about earlier, but I really think, as long as we can continue to re-energize and kind of evolve what we're doing with this process around experienced agent recruiting, we'll only continue to see growth in that area.
Well, this has been super helpful, and I think a lot of our listeners are going to gain a lot from what we've talked about. As we wrap up, I wanted to I think a lot of your home services peers from the past, your leading RE peers, your Realty Alliance, and you guys are involved in a lot of premier sort of networking groups and those kind of things. So what advice would you give them, the owner, the manager, or the somebody in an operations COO sort of position? What advice would you give them concerning putting metrics and real numbers around the recruiting process in their companies?
Well, I first start off by saying many of those peers of ours throughout Leading and Realty Alliance are what we do today as a direct result of those relationships, right? Pat Shea, who's our president and CEO here at Lyon, will tell you that the collaboration that we have within those networks and everyone's willingness to share is why we do what we do and how we do what we do and ultimately how we got to this point. And beyond that, I would say when it comes to measuring and tracking the recruiting process, it first really has to matter to that leader and be established as an area of intense focus, right? And then from there, so that's got to be the primary. If the leader's not bought in, the leader doesn't want to articulate the reasoning for it, then it's just not going to get off the ground, right? But once you've kind of established it as an area of focus that needs to be measured and needs to be tracked, from there, it's really just about identifying the points of leverage, which would be a lead measure, keeping a compelling scoreboard that's seen by everyone, and then maintaining a consistent cadence of accountability. And for many listening in, they'll probably sound pretty familiar. And if it doesn't to you, then my recommendation would be to, order a copy of the 4 Disciplines of Execution. But then, Ben, kind of as we're wrapping up here, as you mentioned at the top of the discussion, we did focus quite a bit on some of the metric and operational side. But, it's also important to remember that we're very much in a people and a relationship business, and we can't really lose sight of that, right? Yeah. Because that's ultimately where the recruiting success lies, is when one of our managers has a relationship with a possible recruiting prospect, and they're able to make a difference in that person's life. That's where the magic happens. So it's important not to lose sight of that.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great way to summarize. In your situation, and just that leadership issue, real quickly, I think that between the leadership that Pache showed towards this whole process was critical, and then to have you alongside having all the metrics together and staying focused on all the levers. I think that combination was really important, and is something that really caused it all to work inside of your company. So.
Yeah, well, and the willingness of the branch managers
Oh,
to
that's right, yeah,
do the hard
yeah.
work, right? And ultimately partnering with each of the coaches that walk them through this and getting them and helping them understand the concept of the system and the process, right? All of it's an important component.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Anthony. It's really been a great discussion, and I think our listeners are going to gain a lot from it. Now, for all those out there who are doing the hard work of recruiting every day, hopefully you'll take what you learned today and go make a difference.